Welcome to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, where we turn listeners into leads and conversations into conversions. I'm Tom Schwab, the founder of Interview Valet, and today's conversation might just be the wake-up call your brand needs. You see, most executives and leaders think that just showing up for a podcast interview is enough. But today's guest, Cary, is here to tell you it's not. And here's the truth. Podcast guesting can transform your brand, your business, and your bottom line, but it has to be done with intention. Josh and I break down the biggest traps that smart professionals fall into, how to define your core message, and how to actually get results, not just interviews. You learn how to show up powerfully, how to work an interview just like it was a keynote stage, and why personal growth and positioning are non-negotiables if you truly want to build authority. Whether you're a coach, a consultant, an author, an entrepreneur, if you've ever asked yourself, why didn't this interview move the needle? Then this episode, well, it's for you. Let's dive in. Recently, I read a LinkedIn post. I couldn't like it enough. I couldn't repost it. It's like, I don't know if it's a copyright infringement, but can I get it on a billboard in Times Squares? And Cary wrote that most executives and leaders go on podcast and think that showing up is enough. And guess what? It's not. And we're going to talk about that today. Josh, welcome.
Tom, always great to see you. I love crossing paths with you in every regard.
Well, and we've known each other for probably a better part of a decade, and we believe the same things. So largely the same things here. So can you unpack that a little bit? What you were talking about that it's not just showing up on an interview that's going to get you the results.
Well, I know that a lot of this I'm preaching to the choir here. You're the master of this yourself. But what it comes down to, and I've learned firsthand through being a host and certainly being a guest, that there's a lot of inherent traps when it comes to being a guest on podcasts. There are so many opportunities to be a guest that if you just put in a little bit of work, you could be a guest on any show. And people think that, oh, great, my job is done. I got the interview. But then they go on the show and then they wonder why nothing, quote, came of it. And that's really where professionals need to understand where the work begins. It's easy to be a guest on a show, go through the motions, spend the time, have a conversation that might even feel good. But if you want a result from it, which we all do, you got to understand that it's not just showing up. You have to know how to get a result.
And I always tell people that if you don't want a result, if you don't expect a result, if you don't do the things to get a result, it's called a hobby, right? I always love how Christopher Lockhead said, marketing that doesn't drive results is called arts and crafts. And if you do arts and crafts, don't wonder afterwards, well, how come it didn't grow my brand? How didn't it grow my business?
That's right. And the more leaders and executives and successful executives that I speak with, the more I realize that they fall into one or two camps. They're either not using podcasts at all as part of their marketing strategy, which early on when I discovered this, I was just very, very surprised that nobody in their circle, even if they have a CMO, are saying, hey, we should get a plan for podcasts. It's almost just disregarded. It's really crazy. And then the other is, like we said, they'll go on the shows, but not have the idea of how to make it a successful and being able to define what success looks like, an appearance. And then they get frustrated when really not much came of it.
Let's unpack both of those, because I think that is a great defining thing there. You've got the people that haven't done it. And I love how you said using it as part of the plan. It's not a silver bullet. It's part of the overall marketing plan. So help me understand how you think of that and present that opportunity to people.
Well, podcast guesting is part of a marketing plan and should be looked at as such. But even that, there's a few great directions to take that. they need to know that they have a story to share, a message that needs to be heard. And more often than not, it's not about just talking about what they do in the context of the business. We can go in that whole direction, and I can give specifics and details of how you show up with a personal brand that elevates you within the business and the company, that makes selling the company and your product or offer or service that much more effective. But again, there's a lot of traps, and one of them is I'm going to go on and I'm going to talk about what we do, who we serve, how we do it. Nobody cares. So what I teach people to do is let's define your core message. And that simply means it's the overriding way and the view in which you see the world. What is that big line in the sand? What mountain are you willing, or what hill are you willing to die on, right? And this comes down to all the things that got you to who you are and where you are today. So I really spend a lot of time helping you define your core message. And then from there, it becomes like spokes on a wheel. We can then craft the necessary stories and talking points that allow you to go on a show, open strong. Those first 60 to 90 seconds are pivotal to engage the listener and get them hooked so they want to continue listening. And that's an opportunity a lot of people miss as well.
Yeah. And I think, and I blame the industry on this too, because this more is better, right? Just go on and tell your story. Well, you wouldn't go on to a physical stage and just wing it and say, I don't know what the audience is. I don't know who it is, but I'll just tell my story. No, that's your brand. And at least if you mess up in front of a live audience, well, chances are nobody else is going to hear it, right? Unless somebody's got a recording device. But on a podcast, that's your brand forever. And I love how you work with people to talk about what, your brand is more than just your color or what font you use. It's what are your beliefs? What are your stories? And, that whole thing of would you die on the hill for, as you said, but I always think of what do you agree and what do you reject? Because those are important.
Yeah, very important. And it's all about, like you said, knowing what this message is. And then I happen to come from the acting and film world, right? So I know rehearsing and performing and communicating and appearing and all the nuance and details that comes with it. But once you get this, you should rehearse, practice a little bit about this. You don't know how many times I just stand in a mirror or while getting dressed and I'll just recite my opening chunk, who I am, what I stand for, how I want to open the show, should it come up, what story I want. You have to. And if you're not, you're missing an opportunity.
That's why I love talking with you. And we've known each other, like I said, for the better part of a decade. I was on Josh's podcast, The Hidden Entrepreneur. I had to look it up, July of 2019, before COVID.
Wow.
And we used to talk at all the podcasting conferences we'd go to, but I love how you come at it from the artistic side, right? The theater side. And I'm looking at it from the engineering side, right? And seeing that what people are doing is not working. What people are teaching is not working. So let's pivot now to that second section where you said, we've got executives that are going out there on podcasts and they think they're having fun. They're doing well, but there's nothing coming of it. How do you look at that? I mean, especially with someone that is a thought leader, an executive, right? They may be media trained already.
Yeah. So it comes down to, from my point of view, identifying the core message, really dialing that in, but then asking yourself, what end result do I want from this show? What do I want the listener to do? Big picture. Sure, you're going to have a call to action. Maybe it's to download something. Maybe it's a giveaway, something that's tied into your bigger offer. But bigger picture, what is the result here? What is the game plan? Are we looking to sell something? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we getting you on shows? Are you looking to speak on stages? Are you looking to sell more books? Are you looking to sell more widgets? What is it about? Are you looking to be the go-to authority in this, right? What are we doing? And then we have to work backwards strategically to make sure that every appearance leads to it. That's why I say it's not enough just to go on shows, because a result like that, just like in business, traditional business, doesn't just happen. You can't get a 3, 6, or 12-month goal or 3-year goal without then identifying how in the world are we going to achieve that. Same thing with podcasts. Again, I don't know why there's this trap, but I guess because the bar to entry is low. Like I said, anybody can find themselves on a podcast tomorrow and then feel good about it. But if you don't know what you're going for, it's just going to fall flat and you're not going to achieve the goal. So you have to work backwards, big picture, and strategically work it out.
It's amazing how many people will start something without asking themselves why they're doing it. Right. And I think that's why so many times podcasts die, right? 80% die within the first 10 episodes, or people that start with podcast appearances, they'll just give up. And it's like, I didn't see the results. Well, what results were you optimizing for? There was a speech coach out of Europe. I wish I could remember her name. She wrote a book and she said, before any conversation, you want to know what you want the other person to think, believe, and do after the conversation. And I was like, wow, that's great for a podcast host, definitely a podcast guest. And I've asked that question so many times to people, and it's like, I've never thought of that. It's like, well, how many podcast interviews have you done? What does success look like if you haven't defined it?
Yeah, the other angle I always talk about with my clients is it doesn't matter, especially in the beginning. It doesn't matter who the listeners are or how big the reach is, because what we're doing is we are going to take the episode in-house on our side and we're going to market it. Don't worry about what they're doing or not doing with the show. That's a bonus. But if you just leave your podcast episodes in the hands of the hosts and think that that's going to be it, even if it is a big show with a wide reach, you're still missing a big portion of it. There are so many things you should and could do with your appearances, not just posting, hey, check out my appearance on this show with a link. There's a variety of things you can do, especially with AI today, and you're missing a big chunk of your benefit in marketing if you're not.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because one of the things that Steve Acho, one of our clients, taught us, he said, more is not better, better is better. And I see so many people just trying to do more and more interviews, right? I'm like, why don't you do more with the interview? Why don't you try to get better results from each one? Correct. And so let's talk a little bit more about this, because the corollary I see is, somebody says, well, I went to the conference. And one person, met all these people. They had all this great conversations. They got all this business from it because they worked the conference. Another person goes, well, I worked the conference, or I went to the conference. I appeared, I showed up, and I got nothing of it. One of them worked it. The other one just showed up. So explain what that means a little bit.
I think a big piece of the puzzle here is who you are as a person showing up. And that is lost on a lot of people. I think step 0 needs to be, how can I improve and enhance my communication skills, my likability? So important. How do you add charm to the mix so you can get people to listen to you, to want to be around you? Do people like being around you? How's your energy? How's your vibe? I talk deeply on spirituality and our energy and our being. That happens to tie into my core message. So I include a lot of that personal growth and development when I'm working with clients to quote unquote improve you as a person. A lot of a lot of people, even the most successful executives, will come to me and they're scared. They're fearful. They'll say, who cares about my story? Does anybody really care? What do I have to say? So most of what I do is first breaking through that and getting them confidently positioned because it's a new medium here, right? It's a little vulnerable, but if you're interested in what we're talking about, getting a result through your podcast guest appearances, it's necessary to start at the beginning. Let's get you enhanced as a person in this arena, but then also, you know, how many people start the podcasts like we were talking about, and then nobody listens. And then they go online and they're like, how can I get people to listen to my show? Nobody's listening. Well, you're not owed listeners, right? It's not a guarantee. Maybe the the people are trying to tell you something. Maybe, but it doesn't mean you can't work through it, but you have to understand what you're working through, right? It's not just, oh, just stick with it, do more of it. Maybe you got to go back to the drawing board and figure out who you are behind the mic as a host or a guest. So working on yourself and the way you show up is paramount. You have to have personal growth embedded into everything you do. So you're coming out of the gate attractive. And I use that word very deliberately, not necessarily physically attractive, but attractive in the true sense of the word and the definition, the ability to attract. That's all this is. Start there. Do you have the ability to attract? Do people want to listen to you? Do they care what you have to say? Do they want to be around you? Fundamental skill.
Can I deconstruct a little bit what I just heard?
Please.
So this is a masterclass. Go back, and I hate that term because everybody uses that for a sales pitch, but go back and listen to Josh's last answer. What did you learn from that? You learned who Josh is, right? He's spiritual. He believes in becoming a better person, right? That was attractive to the right people. There were some people that would say, no, that's not for me. And that's fine. Marketing isn't supposed to attract everyone. It's supposed to attract your ideal clients, right? The other thing there is he starts talking with what he believes, right? And his philosophy worked in there of why he knows that, right? It's not all just his story. It's his story supports his point of view, which is very clear point of view, right? So often I'll hear people say, I run a full service digital marketing agency. What does that mean? Right? That tells me nothing. Or I'm a business coach or a life coach. That's just meaningless. That tells me nothing. It doesn't attract. It doesn't repel. It just makes me turn it off. There's no hook there. And so being clear on who you are, what you believe, what you do, why you do it is foundational to that. And Josh, I also wanted to point out something that I noticed in your social media, right? You had talked about repurposing interviews. And there are some people that do this as a form of self-promotion, right? And you can see, look at me. Here I am with this famous person, right? And I'll put the link to that article that we referenced at the very beginning. There you are at VaynerMedia, right? You're working with the client, and you could have taken the selfie with the client and just put it up there, but you had the whole team in there. And that says who you are. And another thing that actually one of our past clients now works for for LinkedIn. And it was interesting. She talked to us about that when you post a video or a picture just of yourself, you will not get the same level of love from the algorithms as if you put in, somebody asking you the question or someone answering it. So the more eyeballs, the more amplification you get. And the same thing with pictures, right? If you would have just put you and, the celebrity, like so many people do, right? Here I am, with my good friend, whatever it is, and it's a staged picture,
Yeah.
right? You get a little bit of credit, but when there's more people in there, it's indexing all those other people. And I remember asking them, well, do I have to tag all the other people? And they just sort of smile and they're like, no, we know who the other people are. Right. So it's that, you give to get on there. And so definitely look at what Josh is doing, because he's doing it the right way with the right heart and teaching people the right way to do it.
Thank you for pointing that out and acknowledging that. And this came from years of trial and error and failing, quote unquote, and falling and figuring it out and saying, well, that didn't work. I have to figure out what will work. And then just seeing a little nugget of, well, that got a good response. I'm not saying anything new here, but you have to put in that work. It also comes down to a big element I add into everything I do with clients, which I do for myself, which is what you're referring to, which is positioning. How are you positioned outside of your podcast appearances that can then help lead to the appearances? I'm very deliberate with my own positioning, and then I'm able to get the clients that see what I'm capable of doing. This goes back to how many coaches and consultants do we hear that say, hey, how do I get more clients? Well, I looked at your social profile and a few things that are readily available, and nothing shows who you are and what you do and who you do it for and nothing. So maybe if you claim to help people with X, Y, and Z, start doing X, Y, and Z. Start there. Start doing the very thing you want to be known for and see what happens.
How about the communities you're known in? Because, there's that whole thing of you can't say enough of the right things to the wrong people. But I also see that sometimes people that have an expert status will go on appearances and stages that don't support that expert status. And I can remember one consultant that came to us, and, I always ask him, my first question is, why do you want to do podcast interviews? Right. And I loved his answer, Josh. He came back and he said, because I think most of digital marketing is like advertising above a urinal. And I'm like, explain that.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm a high level consultant, right? If somebody sees me advertising above a urinal or on a park bench or a bus, he said, that hurts my brand. He says, I want to be seen in the rooms, having the discussions with the people that elevate my brand, right? It's that whole idea of, do you want to just get attention or do you want to build authority? So how do you think about that as you're looking at the places, the stages that you want to be in and podcasts?
Well, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to achieve? What are you going for? And then, like I said, work backwards from there. So if you want to be known as a certain thing, you have to be crystal clear. And then put in the pattern and the effort and the work to determine how you achieve that. Whether you're a host or a guest, it's everything.
And I think of it like almost like your LinkedIn profile that you put up there, right? If you just say, I'm a coach, I'm an executive coach, whatever that is, that doesn't help me. But, you're very clear. You're a strategist. You're the private media strategist, and you work with Fortune CEOs, right? To turn executives into undisputed industry authorities. And I look at that and go, that is a defining thing where people will turn you up or turn you off. It's like, that's either me or that's not me. But to be very clear with that, I think of, there was a presidential candidate, Admiral Stockdale, that started his vice presidential debate. And he started it with, who am I and why am I here? And that's where he went on there. And I'm thinking, that's the first question on podcast interviews that people want. Who are you? Why are you here? And everything sort of supports that. So what other opportunities do you find that people are missing, right? If showing up isn't just enough, how can they really work a podcast appearance just like you'd work any other marketing activity?
The core message, dialing into your core message, who you are, what you stand for. And again, it's simply your core message is the overriding way in which you see the world. What is that fundamental way that makes your world go round? I'll give you my example so you see a little clearer. And this came over some time, right? You might have to do a little work or exercises to figure it out, or it might just immediately come to you. But mine is that everything in our inside world, everything in our outside world is a reflection of our inner world. So everything going on here, whatever we want to change, whatever we're kicking and screaming about to change, is a reflection of the inner work that needs to be done. So if you want something to change here, it has to begin here. And this goes back to the personal growth. How do you become the best version of yourself? Now, if you notice, as my core message, it says nothing about my business. And that's by design, because then you start peppering in the business and what you're selling and offering when it's time. But like the spokes on the wheel, your core message is now what it's about. And through that, my brand, the Hidden Entrepreneur, is also about that. It supports that. That's because I spent 4 decades of my life hiding, showing up in every situation, hiding my true talent, my true ability, playing small in exchange for seeking approval. And then I go on to share more of my story and then the talking points and everything I do. And that's how you round out a very effective message as a guest on a show.
And focusing on their problem, their pain. And that's the other thing I heard you say in there is you were talking about the hidden entrepreneur. It's your story, but you're talking to other people that have the same story, right? They're resonating with
universal.
that.
Yeah.
I remember early on a client, previous company, came to us and he said, I was covering the phones at lunch and he goes, you guys are just like Preparation H. And I was taken aback and I said, excuse me, why are we like hemorrhoid cream? And he's like, no, it's a compliment, right? You came recommended. You gave me fast relief. You took away the pain in my rear end. And that's when it really struck me that nobody cares about the product or service. Nobody cares about anything other than the pain in their rear end. So if you can show them through who you are, what you share, what you communicate, what you believe, that you're the solution to their problem, that you understand their problem, then they'll come along with you. You're not just trying to sell them.
Yeah. I mean, this entire conversation, I'm very aware. I'm almost projecting out of what it's like when this is published and somebody is listening to it, because that's who I'm speaking to, right? It's not just I, me, this is my story. Although, that's, I'm me and this is my story. But there's an adjustment here. Like you're saying, you have to focus on the other person. It just comes down to knowing the path, knowing the work you need to put in, putting it in for the result you want. Same thing, like if you're starting a business, you're not just going to haphazardly do it. You're going to ideally be strategic about it. You need to put in the same effort and work and time consistently with guesting, so the result is there for you and knowing what it is about.
Well, Josh, this has been great. This is the same conversation that we'd be having over coffee or a beer. And I'm so glad we got to share it with the world. How can people find out more about you? What's the next step with them?
I'm on social. LinkedIn is where you found that wonderful article where I love playing. You want to see me on LinkedIn, Josh Cary is there. Or my website, joshcary.com is great.
Definitely check it out. There's something I wanted to share with you. One of our clients, Eddie Yoon, wrote a book called Super Consumers. Harvard Business Review published it. And he's got a way of framing the world. He says there's missionaries and mercenaries. So you can look at this in employees. You can look at these as partners. You can look at these as companies. And as I look at you, right, there's the missionaries that were there at the beginning. They are there at the end. They believe in it. It's their heart. It's what they do. That's missionaries. And the mercenaries are the ones that come in later. They'll show up because they get some money to make. They'll leave with the next thing. But I am thrilled to have known you for over a decade here. I've learned so much from you. You're one of the missionaries. You're one of the thought leaders in this space. So until we see each other again in real life.
You're the best. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Wow. What a powerful conversation with Josh Cary. If there's one big takeaway, it's this. Being a guest is not the goal. Getting results is. And Josh reminded us that the podcast interviews aren't just about sharing your story. They're about creating a compelling narrative that connects with your audience and ultimately drives action. It's about clarity, confidence, and communication, not just random conversations. So here's your next step. Define your core message, not your pitch, not your bio, but your beliefs. What do you stand for? What do you reject? When you get clear on that, every interview becomes a strategic opportunity, not just another vanity play. And don't stop at the recording. Repurpose, promote, and position yourself as the authority your ideal clients are already looking for. Want to get better results from every interview? Then go over to interviewvalet.com and grab some of the free resources. Until next time, don't just show up, but stand out and get results.